Perfect. Hi, everyone. We'll just get everyone through the door. Excellent. Well, hi, everyone. Great to have you here today. I'm Joe from Gendo, and today is all about helping you get the most out of Gendo, whether you're brand new or you've been using it for a while and keep hitting the same walls. So we've gone through hundreds, if not thousands of questions from past workshops and built this session around what architects ask for most. How do we keep consistency across views, stopping things from changing, holding image quality through multiple edits, and building Gendo into the process from day one? So George, Will, and Ismail from the Gendo team will take you through the fundamentals, right through to more of the advanced stuff. And we're very excited today. We've got a special guest, Ed Meyers, who's co-founder of Settle. He used Gendo with his co-founder across an entire project stage, replacing their Unreal Engine and Photoshop workflow, cutting visualization time by around 80% per image. So he'll share why Settle chose Gendo, how they went from SketchUp screenshots to final presentation imagery, and what they've learned through producing a competition mission in Gendo as well. You're also going to get an exclusive preview of what's coming next, really exciting, including custom styles and project memory, and of course, an exclusive offer. So maybe just before we begin, a couple of quick housekeeping rules. This session is being recorded. We'll share it with you afterwards, so no need to worry if you miss anything. We've got plenty of time for Q&A, so please drop your questions in the chat as we go. And always, let us know where you're watching from. I can see people saying hello already, which is great. We'd love to see where everyone's tuning in from. So with that, I'll head over to George to kick off.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to have you again and to be doing another webinar. I'll just introduce Gendo briefly for those of you who are not totally familiar, but Gendo is a browser-based platform for architects and designers to leverage the latest in all the crazy AI and ML technology that is emerging around us. And our purpose is to tailor that, productize it, train it to be best in class for architecture and design, and in an interface which is very easy to use, so that anyone in any stage of design can be leveraging it across all sorts of types of architecture. It's free to try. If you haven't already, please log in and just have a go. You can more than welcome to sort of play along with us. We'll share a couple of links in the chat as we're going as well if you want to jump into the boards that we're demonstrating in too. So to introduce myself properly, I'm George. I'm one of the co-founders of Gendo along with Will. My background is in architecture, so I studied here in London and worked in a few architecture offices doing mostly residential architecture from individual family homes up to large town expansions. And I got steadily more and more into Viz in the traditional sense, sort of 3ds Max and V-Ray, before then meeting Will and co-founding Gendo. And with that, I'll pass to Will.
Yeah, thanks very much, George. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Really excited for this one this afternoon. Yeah, my name's Will. I'm George's co-founder. My background's fairly traditional software engineering. Worked in a few different types of company, but I always had this special interest in applying technology, specifically machine learning for image production and design purposes. Hence, meeting George all those years ago now and talking about the new generative AI world and how that could have an impact on design in general. That's where I was born. And yeah, ever since we've been building Gendo, and I've been running the kind of technical side of the company since then. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. I'll pass to Ismail.
Yeah, hi everyone. Great to see you again, and hello for the newcomers as well. My name is Ismail. I'm the head of applied AI here at Gendo. Like George, I've been an architect for 13 years before joining Gendo earlier this year. Over the past 3 years, I've been really testing practical AI workflows for architecture and design, and this is why I joined Gendo and think that this is like the best fit for me right now. And I'm excited to like do some live demos with you guys today, trying to do some consistent design view iterations. So yeah, without
Awesome.
yeah, we will pass it to Ed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just to say that as the title suggests, we'll be focusing on some consistency, and most of this session is born of as Joe said, the questions we've received over the many months about how best to get stuff out of the platform. But more excitingly than our sort of demonstration, we have Ed who has used it in real world context on an actual project and can talk us through his process. his design process, as well as then how Gendo was a small part of that. So with that, I'll maybe pass to Ed to introduce himself and take us through it.
Yeah, hi everyone, and just again, thanks to the Gendo team for putting me on the spotlight here. It's an amazing opportunity and an amazing platform that has really helped our workflow, as George was saying. But just a little background on me: I'm from Australia originally. I worked there for 6 years and became registered there, and then made the leap to the UK in 2018 to study at the Architectural Association, and did some more sort of computational robotic kind of work and workflows in the DRL. And then from there, I've worked for a couple of companies in London, Zaha did, and now at Heatherwick. So um, I'm kind of on the next chapter now, and working towards building a small studio with a great friend of mine who can't be here today, Andrew Friedenberg. We're doing kind of small timber focused architecture, anything from a small house to a bigger hotel all over the world. So that's me, and that's kind of where I'm heading. And yeah, again, thanks for the opportunity, guys. Really appreciate it. Okay. George, I'm going to share my screen.
Perfect. I'll take
Go
this
straight
one.
into it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. George, can you see that one? Okay, great. So yeah, as I said, we're a small studio, just two of us, basically a startup. We focus on smaller residential, and we've kind of jumped into the world of glamping, camping, small cabin design, and how architecture and nature can kind of become one over the last couple of years, which is from both myself and Andrew's background. We're from green outbacky places of Oregon and Australia. So we thought, okay, let's put our skills at making beautiful images and beautiful buildings and pair them one with nature. So this is kind of a selection of work that we've done over the years. But more in focus, I guess, on the project of Highlight, which we use Gendo to really excel to another level we couldn't believe. It was an amazing one. Was a competition in Sicily near Mount Etna, which this photo was taken. We went on the competition earlier this year, and we basically had, I think the full blown effort was only about 4 to 5 weeks to really pull this thing together. So the timelines were tight, but the passion was high, and we had a great tool at hand. So um, we had a really quite stringent brief, though. This was the thing; it was a very real life project. The client was very keen to get a result that they could build, get a result that was affordable, and get a result that could ultimately be economical for a small hotel startup in Italy called Open Air Suites. Who they're the guys at Open Air Suites again are amazing. Please check them out. They are beginning to go on a venture of doing open air hotels, so small glamping to cabin to bigger kind of hotel style applications in all over different parts of different rural areas of Italy. And their one kind of message is to really provide a place that connects people with nature. And we kind of sat between that to try and deliver a strong architectural language, which could be rolled out across all their sites across Italy, but have a very kind of nuanced local approach to each one of those sites. So a part of the architecture that I guess could change to be recognizable of that place, from Sicily to Tuscany up to the Alps. We wanted to develop, I guess, a prototype that could fit all those, but be somewhat changeable. So straight away, we looked at the site. I mean, Mount Etna, I mean, it's an amazing case study area that they have. It's part of a winery just near the base of Mount Etna on the western side. It gets amazing views. So there's not much you need to do. I think architecture kind of needs to get out of the way a little bit, you know. There's a lot already there. There's a lot already to see. And I think our thing, or our our architecture was about framing that, hence the name Frame, which is what we called the project in the end. It was quite simple. Um, and that kind of came as well from an amazing history of agriculture and architecture in the region as well, which is very kind of heavy stone masonry buildings that have these insane kind of vistas outward all over the landscape. I think that was the ideas were already there. We didn't have to do much. It's quite an amazing place. And I think there's something else about Italy that you all know about, which is food and their production of food and the way that they've done it for many thousands of years. Sicily is one of those places that produces an amazing citrus and wine industry. And part of OAS's venture is to really get those small kind of nuanced agricultural industries and put them on show in their suites. So that was kind of one thing that we started to work with. So we started without a computer, as always. It's just pen, paper, ideas, plan, section, elevation, and really started to digest their brief and really digest what they wanted, which was very much in the DD level of design, i.e., they knew how big this thing needs to be. It needs to be a rectangle. It needs to be made from this. It needs to be made from that. So we're like, okay, where do we fit in here? Again, we just looked at these guys and we're like, okay, that's pretty simple. It's a bit of stone and some beautiful interlocking terracotta roofs. And guess what? The landscape around it makes that place. So let's not try too hard here. Let's just let it happen. So we gathered ourselves and we gathered the plan that they gave us, which is 4.5 by 5.5 meters, and basically created two living opportunities or two cabins for a small hotel. One cabin being a deluxe, one cabin being a standard. They're both for couples or two people, with a small dining area, study, storage area, bath, and sleeping area. Very simple. We just took a basic approach of compressing them through the entry and putting their utilities at the back and opening them to the view of Mount Etna. And then those series of functions in between themselves and Mount Etna would open up as well to Mount Etna. But there's one thing in the way of that, and that's the facade or the architecture itself. What do you do? How does that piece in the middle respond to yourself and the landscape out there? So we started with a box, and then we began to add these apertures on top of the box, which are a kind of a direct relationship with their use behind, from anything from a kind of corner dining area and space in the interior, which could open up and you could sit on the edge of the facade, to a private kind of window, which would align perfectly with the bed. When you're lying down, you could look out into the landscape, to entries and exits of the buildings as well. And at the same time, we created this depth that we were really kind of intrigued by in the kind of heavy masonry buildings of Sicily. We got a building that could be shaded. Sicily is very, very hot in summer at this time of year. How do we protect? How do we make it comfortable? How do we do all those things? The architecture isn't just a identity piece. It needs to perform. It needs to be doing something for the comfort of the interiors. So we got to the kind of this level of planning, which we were happy with. It worked. It was compact, but somewhat ticked all the boxes. We kind of got there. But for us, the facade and I guess understanding how these interior and exterior relationships could be viewed through was really important. And what was really important was understanding how they could be built in a quite an efficient manner. They're OAS or a startup. They're not looking for anything Zaha did crazy design. They just want something that works, that's subtle, and again that respects, the nature around it. So very kind of simple diagramming and work here. Again, this image here, thanks to Gendo. I'll show you in a minute how we got to this. But yeah, from anything from bigger visuals to detailed sections, we really start to flex that in Gendo as well. And it was something that we were surprised that could work very well. So we created a number of different units. And again, I think the beauty of this was how the kind of apertures and facades could react to different landscapes, different types of agricultures. And now I'm going to go into some of the videos. Again, a great feature and something that really took our visuals to another level in Gendo, and something that I say you guys need to use as much as possible. I think video editing and video production has been such a lengthy kind of Adobe Premiere Pro kind of stitching things together sequence, but now this has just taken one of our images and really brought it to life. and just to see and really feel these spaces and the different times of day and add that level of movement for us just brought so much more life. I think this, yeah, the client was very, very, yeah, excited when we showed them this. They couldn't believe it. As I said, being able to go from an image to this is quite incredible. Um, yeah, it really sets the tone. So that was that. Oh, I've got more. Oh, there was a kind of an amenity component as well, which again, we designed in conjunction with the units and the cabins. So just a little bit on workflow. So that was the kind of the project in a whole, and the concept. I think it'd be good to say like this is the kind of modeling that we do and do day in day out at our workplaces, and this is basically not Easter eggs, but a bunch of trees, I think, with a mapped mesh, probably landscape, and then a bunch of units that we've thrown together quite quickly. We've put an indicative path in, and we've taken a Rhino screen grab in render mode, and then I think with I'll jump to the Gendo board in a minute, but I think we got this in 4 images, and I think I really want to say the we didn't have to put any of these in Photoshop. It was a kind of iterative process of taking that model and just doing an image, slightly changing our prompt, slightly changing our input image, doing another one. It gets better and better. We're not losing quality. I think this is like something really powerful with the app that we again it took our work to another level. Again, I don't even think this is render mode. But really quick, we're like, okay, we need an elevation. Okay, let's make it moody. Let's put a dog in it. Done. I think this one was 3 images. This was probably one of my favorite images. I think the way that it captures the rain droplets is beautiful. We prompted that in. Again, yeah, it was in the tight time frame. I think we did this, 3 days out, and it was probably one of our favorite images. So from the exterior, it would, like, I think, this is an object in green space, and I think it does look beautiful when you tie those two things together. We thought, okay, let's do this exactly for interiors, but we need a little bit more direction. The client specified different types of interiors they wanted. They wanted a plywood, fine. So we just took this into Enscape quickly, and again, I think we even got better results just putting that up a little bit extra time and just chucking Enscape and putting a few materials on it. It really, really came out well. Picked up the materials of cushions and other accessories as well, which we really enjoyed. Again, the landscape component and just writing Mediterranean planting is what you see there under Mount Etna. It's just picking up exactly what we want. We want prickly pears. Perfect, Um, again, and even at a finer detail, we're like, okay, this is an Enscape shot. We let's really get the touch and feel like what is the bathroom made of? What does it feel like to roll your hands across, the side of the wall here? We wanted a basalt kind of volcanic stone, and this is kind of the result we got. We wanted a raw kind of brassy look with the tarnishing, and we wanted that. We wanted the towel. We wanted the kind of small kind of Aesop bottles. We got it all. And I think this one was done very late in 2 images. So that's a really quick roll through of the project. And I hope that made sense. And I hope everyone enjoyed that. Again, thanks for you guys. We're Settle Design. Please hit us up on Insta and have a look at our website as well. We've got lots of upcoming projects, which are really exciting. So cool. I'll hand it over to the questions.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. Thanks, Ed. I mean, beautiful, stunning, delicious, all the adjectives you could choose. I mean, you sort of touched upon some of your workflow bits there. Maybe it's quite clear. I mean, I guess I'm interested while some other questions come in to know what the difference of using Enscape rather than sort of Rhino Raw did for you.
Yeah, I think definitely mapping materials in Enscape obviously gives a bit more direction to Gendo. When you definitely want a plywood interior, you'll get a plywood interior. And I think what we loved was that we were even getting down to iterating grains of plywood interior in Gendo. I think the the one thing that did was just jumped a few steps. We didn't have to deal with like looking at plasterboard interiors. It just went to a plywood interior, and we could really focus in on the detail. I think the one thing that we found, and I can share if you want me to share my board, I
Yeah,
can.
please, yeah.
Um, is sure, Chuck. If you're going to do it in okay, there you go. So that was that first image I showed. I mean, this is a rendered um, Rhino mode. We got this one and we thought, hey, let's just make it moody. And then we said, hey, let's just delete that guy. He's still there. And then we got the dog. So I just want to reiterate on what I was saying before. I think, yeah, we got that in 4 images. That was great. On the Enscape question, which we use for, actually, I'll just go to the other project board for interiors. Bear with me. We did that just to guide the materiality a little bit better. I think what we found was previously we've always put the line weights on full to read the geometry. It had no problem, which is great. As you can see, this is the first pass. I was a bit confused with the fireplace. We needed that as an iron. Yeah, it got there in the end. We got some little additional features which we thought were cool as well. But I think, yeah, if you've got a bit more of a solid brief, yeah, we kind of needed to just give it a bit more direction. But yeah.
Yeah, nice. We've had a little flood of questions, which is awesome. Some of which I'll just skip because we'll touch upon them later. But maybe
Yeah.
one is about the depth of prompting and describing the environment of landscape. Like, how do you think about prompting? What do you say when you're asking things? How do you phrase it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for full transparency here, by the way, guys. I mean, there's our prompt. It was agro-tourism cabins. I mean, by the way, we put these prompts through Claude or something like that. We actually thought about them. And we were as descriptive as possible without being over descriptive. It sounds weird to say that, but I think there's a level of, and Gendo team, you would definitely know this from the inputs that you get. There's definitely a level of detail that's enough and too much and not enough. I think, and I think the beauty of and this world that we're jumping is how much control the architect or how much authorship the architect has versus how much authorship the AI has. And I think there's a fine line between really getting it right. And I think it's not just the prompt. I think it's definitely your reference images need to be on point. You really need to know what you want to produce. I mean, you need to know, understand the environment that this takes place in. I think we were very surprised how ultra specific as well Gendo was at understanding that this was under Mount Etna, and that it kept us putting that little smoking volcano in the background, which we loved. So I guess, yeah, I would just play with the tool. I mean, it took us a few goes to really understand, what sort of like constant prompts we needed to put in. Just about, we put these in our Gendo team, maybe how to answer this. I don't know if it does read this, but we always put them in. We do this at work too. Never change the camera, never change the geometry.
Yeah, I call this prompt anxiety. Yeah, I
Yeah,
have it as well.
exactly. It probably does nothing, but we do it anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you can be as specific as you want, but I think something like this is, I guess it was enough for us. Yeah. Again, it took us a few goes. We went too light at the start and too heavy at the end, and then we kind of found a middle ground. We saved our prompts off, and then used them more and more. So yeah, hope that
Yeah,
answers
clear.
that one.
Yeah, clear. I mean, there's a couple of questions about achieving sort of details. I guess there's a couple of references to like architectural details, but I guess you've also mentioned some materiality and some of the like finer sort of layer of things. How did you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So in terms of like details, I mean, for example, I'm just going to zoom in on this one. The hardware on the frame is something that we did not prompt, and has come through. And again, hats off to the Gendo team. This adds a layer of realism to these images that is very appreciated by panels and clients that don't completely know what happens in the AI world. So it's adding door handles and things. Again, we're not prompting that. The lighting, we had a light and it gave us some other pennant ones that are actually floating, but it's fine. Again, these things were happy accidents, I guess, and things that we rolled with in the end. So yeah, again, if you want them in, prompt them. We never did, and it just read our geometry as a door, which was great. I I mean, sure, there's a level of modeling. I think this is opens up another question. Is like the level of modeling, and also the scale of modeling. I assume that Gendo is picking up an image here and knows that a door frame is about that big, 2 by 4, whatever. And it's looking at my image and it says, okay, that looks about 2.4 proportionally in that view, and I'll add a bunch of hardware to it. So I don't think there is jumping in modeling. If you want these kind of results, I think you need to model them well to get these kind of things um, to work in terms of details. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. There was another question about reference images. I mean, you mentioned finding the right one.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a couple of examples, and maybe some thoughts about what helped, like what kind of image did you use and for what reason?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reference images are, I mean, first off, we try and find an image close to what we're doing. This one I can see is a kind of timber cavern raised off the ground in a forest, late afternoon sun. Like as I'm talking, they're the things that we kind of wanted. We wanted a timber cavern raised off the ground in afternoon sun with a kind of pine tree kind of dancing around it, and we kind of got the result. So I think as again, be specific with what you're looking for and make sure that the reference image expresses that. Um, we tried as much as possible to use real life references rather than other renders. I mean, sure, you could use other. There's an amazing rendering companies out there that really bring them to life as an art form, and if that's something you want, sure. But I mean, we were going for quite a real life output at the end of the day. Like all our images are basically that. So yeah, we searched long and hard and built up quite a library of reference images. Oh yeah, there's that one there, for example. So yeah, I think just this is actually a render, but I think a lot of ours were based on as well lighting, atmosphere, and flora and fauna, and the nature that the building sits in. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, clear. I mean, I guess the sort of killer question and theme is about consistency, right, between sort of views and across the project. And I don't think anyone could say that these aren't very consistent and obviously the same project. But how was your sort of experience in maintaining that across multiple views?
Um, yeah, it's a really good question. I think it came down to the prompting. Definitely there was a consistency in what we were prompting. So there was always a few words like Italy, Sicily, Mount Etna, Mediterranean. So that was always used. We had a little kind of library of prompts, and every image we kind of put that into that to just keep that style. You put yourself in a client or a competition panelist's shoes. They want to see that it's the same project, which again cuts out that middleman of Photoshop, right? Putting the same filters and masks and et cetera, on all the images to make them look the same. It did it for us, and I think it was only a sentence of text that really drove that home. So yeah, accurate, consistent, disciplined prompting, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then one more from me is what would your advice be to someone who's touching Gendo for the first time today? What would you say is the sort of most important thing to know?
Um, I mean, I, honestly, just dive in, iterate as quickly as possible. Don't be too careful of, and cautious at the beginning stages. Really, set up your models as detailed as you can in the time you have. For example, that something like that, and just go for it. Really experiment with the prompting. Build up a library of reference images and experiment with atmosphere and lighting and everything that you want in an image. Do it quickly and as fast as possible because that's the only way. I mean, we never used Gendo 3 months ago either, and we just had to dive in. We've kind of forced ourselves to do it. So I think the answer is don't be scared and iterate as fast and rapidly as possible. Um, because you'll find patterns which will then get you consistency and control in your results. And I think that's when it becomes really powerful. And you can produce these images in 10 minutes. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, just go for it and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome, thank you. There's been a bunch of questions in there, but some of them relate to what we're talking about later and a bit more sort of product-y. So unless there's anything else from the team before we release you, Ed, back into real work. No? Okay.
Maybe just one. Sorry, just going through because maybe just to mention, we'll get back to everyone if we've missed any of your questions for sure afterwards as well. But Ed, I mean, it's a hard one, but I know in obviously the case study, we kind of put an estimate to time, but is there any way you can put a rough estimate in terms of the time saving towards the client presentation, kind of using Gendo?
Yeah, I mean, look, we kind of said it was about 80% in saving. So I think, yeah, to be honest, I mean, it was a 4 to 5 week project, but I think that really the last week and a half was was pivotal in getting that image generation out. And I would say the last week, I mean, even the night before or the day before the presentation, we were still tweaking lighting and things. So I think I would say, look, it was a 5 week project. I think if we didn't have gender, it would have been another 2 3 weeks
Yeah.
of rounds of images. Getting lighting. I mean, we would have taken it to Unreal and we would have done a kind of twin motion pass, and then the lighting alone in that takes for one image is a day to get it really, really right. We might spread it over 2 days or something. So yeah, I would say on image time we're saving about 80%. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, maybe a sort of a question to expand on that. Do you think your design process was different for being able to iterate on images that quickly, or were you still sort of designing and then sort of producing an image at the end in a sort of more traditional sense?
No, I think I think it did change our design flow a lot, because what we did is instead of just designing and front loading the design and then end loading the image, we did design, image, design, image, design, image, design, image, and then we'll get a bunch of results. And what would that would do would just like save time down the line. Like, oh, we know that already doesn't look great. Like, can it? Let's run this force, run that design. Okay, great. Let's have a look at that. Image, image, image. You know what I mean? So I think it made us produce more accurate final images far earlier in the process to give us feedback on, what these designs will look like. And for us, it's just quicker feedback. We can get to the solution far quicker. We can actually, in a short time frame, we don't have to just grit our teeth and go for one option and then produce and then do the image at the end, which might be the complete wrong option. We can handle quite a lot of design options quite early on and test them and see how they really look and feel. I think that's the big like jump here, is like how they really feel, like what their atmosphere is like. And at the end of the day, as architects, we're trying to simulate what it is like to be in these buildings, right? And if the closer we get to that at the earlier stage, the more successful we are. So I think we really changed our workflow, and it gives us more time to think about the nuts and bolts of the design and get that right, and the planning and the other things. Because you know sure, we love spending hours and hours on images, but it has freed up the designer and it actually, to be honest, is going to free up the discipline to empower ourselves elsewhere. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, amazing. Yeah, agree entirely. I think it's a lot of pointless technical work saved, and then much more room for design decision making, which is actually what matters. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again so much for taking us through. It's a beautiful project to see, and thanks for taking us through in so much detail what you're up to on Gendo. Cool.
No
So
worries.
maybe cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gendo. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ed.
Okay, I'll just take over the screen again. There we go.
Perfect. Thanks, George. Yeah, thanks to Ed. And we've just got a very quick poll, please. If you could just quickly fill it in, it won't take too long. Mainly just covering kind of industry, and then if you've used Gender on a real project as well, and then where you struggle most with. So maybe just as that's happening, obviously, thank you so much for all the questions, George, Ismail, and we're going to cover quite a lot of those in the next section of this as well. So yeah, please do keep answering through the poll. That will help steer some of the conversation as well. And again, thank you for everyone who's put in so many questions as well, which is brilliant. So we'll get to that. We'll just give it another few seconds.
Yeah, please do keep the questions coming. We are taking notes. We'll have tactically left some because we know we'll touch on them in a minute. So please don't worry if your question hasn't been answered yet.
Cool, perfect. Cool. I'm going to wrap up that poll now and yeah, hand back to George. Thanks.
Thank you. Cool. So we're constantly working to improve the platform. We've got a small but mighty team making changes, some of which more obvious than others. But we also do constant calls with users and studios to make sure that we're gathering feedback. So we thought it might be worth just showing you some of the things we've done in the last few weeks so that you're up to speed, which again will answer a couple of the questions we've had. The first is that many of you have noticed that over iterations of images, this sort of quality can take a bit of a hit. So we've been working, or Ismail rather, has been working hard to find a solution there. So in this video is an example of the same prompt run against Gendo and Nano Banana so that you can see the difference. Basically, this is sort of a fundamental tech problem. So you'd experience a similar thing in ChatGPT or Grok or whatever, that sort of overuse of the same image can rather destroy the quality. So what we've shipped in the last few days is a change which means that you should no longer see the images degraded anywhere near the speed that you were before, and that again we've restricted the chance of it making changes outside of the area that you're intending to. There's a couple of questions around that. We've sort of mentioned it in previous calls, but AI is inherently random, and depending on how you've prompted, what your input is, etc., you can open the door more or less to the random, but it is always there. But we do a number of things to try and control that and keep it architecturally specific. So this is a really exciting one because it means you should be able to iterate much more regularly and rapidly and maintain image quality while you do so. So please do have a go and see what you make of it. What I'll do is just pan across to some boards and we can maybe talk about a couple of other things. I've got another example here of the degradation. So again, same prompts, Nano Banana and Gendo in this case, but we can see that even I think by the third image, this is the Nano Banana one, there's pretty mucky vegetation in the background here around the changes, whereas with our new update, it is kept much more tight, much more consistent, and not messing around with anything outside of the intended changes. And you can see that it starts to change the overall image quality and tone, not just in sort of resolution terms. So yeah, we're very excited to have got this one solved. So the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed a couple of other changes that will have happened this morning. But this maybe sort of first one maybe goes back to some of what Ed was alluding to in terms of reusing prompts and references that you've used previously. A regular request was being able to go back to previous generation details and to extract that information to then reuse in a new one. So what you should see now inside of the history panel, I've got one generation in this space, just for example, is a new details button. And when you click on this, what you'll see is the feature used, so render design in this case, my original input image, the image reference used, and the prompt used here. So I can click this to copy and paste it into another image. I can drag out these references again to reuse them. So again, you should never lose any of this information. And if you want to go back and reuse a prompt that you found useful, you can find it here. And then you can also then just paste it into a sticky note. So that you can come back and find that later too. But that's in the project history now against every generation. We have also done a slight refresh of the UI. So all works the same, just more a graphical thing. So if I select one of our images here and click on render design, for example, what you'll see is just a slight change in layout where we've now got these sort of subsections with little indicators as to whether or not you've filled this in. So I've got render design here. I can drag just this image as a reference, and that little icon is now pink. And I could say night scene, just being a bit loose here, but you can now see that that is ticked, ready to go, and we can generate. But that is across all of the features, so it should be much clearer to new users and old users alike what it is they need to put in the state of the tool as you're using it, so that you can make sure that you're not missing any information that you would otherwise want to include, or why you may not be able to press the generate button. This is something we tested a few months ago and have only just now found the time to implement. So again, the older users will recognize this from the original version of the product. We have also then added a new preview mode. So again, what you'll recognize is that we have the little preview panel, but when I click to look at the outputs and compare them to inputs, rather than holding them or previewing them above the original input image, it now moves to the right, which is where the image would end up when you press the plus icon to add it to the canvas. We found some people getting a bit lost as to which version of the image was actually on the canvas. So this now hopefully is a little more explicit and clear, but again, just a small graphical change. I can press the plus on these and get them on the canvas as before, but hopefully a little clearer and tidier. And then, oh yes, a personal favorite, we had the button down here, fit all in view, which sort of, depending on how big your canvas was, when you clicked it, would only zoom to get most of what was on the canvas in view. We have sort of unrestricted this a little more so that when you press it, it does actually zoom out and hopefully should capture everything. So if you're lost in the board, can't find something, I find it helpful to press fit all in view to then zoom out, see everything from a bird's eye view, and then you can select the asset you want to work with. And then there's this handy little refocus button here, which then brings you back in onto that asset directly. So if you find yourself a little lost in there, that's a nice little quality of life change that should help you navigate the board. Cool. So a few other things behind the scenes, and we'll touch upon a bit more, and some things we're working on at the end. But before handing over to Ismail to talk about how to get some consistency, some best practice, and sort of run through some examples, we thought it might be helpful to just touch on prompting and some best practices here. I mean, hopefully Ed has teed up most of these general tips for me already, which is awesome. So yeah, again, Ed said this himself, that when prompting, you want to be specific about what you want to see. And I mean, maybe when we're talking prompting, Ismail will take us through some input images as well. But Ed said that you want to model the things you want to see and have that level of specificity, alluded to the fact that having some indication of materiality, even if that's just sort of colors in places, is helpful. But then being specific about what you're describing, what you're expecting to see in the scene, because if you don't say it, you shouldn't expect to see it generated. So as he said, there is sort of a happy middle ground of enough information, but not too much or too little, which will come from a little bit of practice more than anything. But what also helps when prompting is to not try to do too much at once. So we saw in Ed's examples that he iterated on a couple of images. He wasn't trying to get everything all at once and didn't have a prompt that sort of alluded to every possible aspect of the image, but described the general direction, had the right reference image to push it in the right direction too, but then went into detail to be like, okay, well, this is 80% correct. I'm now going to fix the material on the stove. I'm going to remove the man and add the dog, Ed's examples, but those are specific changes. And then that means your prompt doesn't have to be overly complicated because you're not trying to fit everything in. You can be direct and clear in a way that both a person and an AI model would understand. Which maybe takes us to this next point, that there was a sort of phase of prompt engineering where you really had to be quite structured about what you were saying, the order you were saying in, and this funny sort of word salad sort of grammatical thing, this is less and less relevant. So the sort of prompt anxiety that Ismail cites, I think, is sort of born of that early phase of the tech. But everyone is training these models to understand conversational instructions and simple, clear instructions better so that you don't have to have some secret prompt skill. You should just be able to say what it is you're wanting to do. And we also look at the models that we're using because we use a number behind the scenes, most of which are our own fine-tuned models. And we can see what you're asking for and make sure that the model understands that based on your instruction. So one of the questions was about some of these small changes that might happen. As I said, we're improving that and trying to control the models more, but adding in things like don't change the camera angle like Ed did. I mean, we assume that that's not necessary. The end game is that you don't have to say what you don't want it to do. You just tell it what you want it to do. And I think sometimes saying what you don't want it to do can be confusing because you're throwing in keywords for things you don't want, which can muddy the water a little. So I would always be careful with the words that I'm using and the sort of context implied with that. I think Ed was saying about adding in the little details of the hardware when talking about the door or material finishes or the sink. Some of that is just sort of in the language as well as in the input image. So if you say window frame, it will understand, or door frame, that that is what these things look like, and the little details are part of that. So this goes back to the specificity. You want to include terms like that to make sure that it understands those things in detail. And then, yeah, reference images are part of the prompts, critical parts, and always quite helpful because, as Ed said, they contain a lot of context. There's atmosphere, detail, lighting, materiality, camera angles, all of that stuff is in there. And we're looking at how we can sort of break apart the referencing so you could be more nuanced. But at the moment, it's sort of everything all at once. So you want to pick the right image carefully, as Ed said, to make sure that it is pointing in the same direction as your prompt critically, but also has all of the things that you're looking for inside of your image. And as Ed said, they spend a long time looking for the right references. But what we see people do is using the describe tool to generate a reference that they like, that they might quickly generate a bunch of descriptions. So what was it? The agri cabin was, was that the phrase that Ed used on his prompt? Something like that. I'm just going to generate that. That you might be able to put in these keywords, describe what you're imagining in general terms, generate from just the prompt, and then you can see, okay, well, is this the right aesthetic? Is this the right lighting, etc.? And then use that as your reference image to then carry into your more design-specific assets. So that's a very important part of prompting and getting it right. And then the last thing to say about getting what you're expecting out of it is maybe to make sure that you choose the right tool. Ismail will go through this in a little more detail. AgriCaptain has given us some tractors, which is maybe not the reference image we wanted, but hopefully the point is clear still. I should have used a more specific prompt. AgriCaptain is too short and not enough context, so illustrating some poor prompting for you there. But choosing the right tool is critical, and we'll go through them in detail. But all of the ones that we've sort of got on the toolbar here, they're all trained to be architecturally specific and for certain steps in the process. So we find that people who jump between tools, between chat, between render, generally get their outcomes faster and better where they've worked out, the appropriate place to leverage each. But as I say, we'll get into that with Ismail. So I haven't been watching the chat, but unless there's any specific questions on sort of prompting, I can maybe hand over to Ismail. Okay, cool. We'll fill some as we go. All right, well, I'll stop sharing and Ismail can take over.
Awesome. Thank you, George. I mean, now we will try to jump into a more practical demo, product demo sort of workshopy session where we focus on the design consistency, but just like adding also to the prompting and what George was just discussing right now, I would also leverage the Gendo assistant for that. Like if you are still a little bit earlier in the design phase and you still have you want to have some ideas about like the design and you're not like very specific about I want to do one, two, three. The Gendo assistant is really good at that and it can like nudge ideas back and forth with you, which is something that I hopefully will be able to showcase right now. So I have a SketchUp model of a project that is quite detailed, I would say. So this is a SketchUp model where a hint of like materiality is added with some colors, as well as like differentiation between what's transparent, what's solid, some trees, some references to like the street. And the point right now for us is to do it live with you. I mean, George and Will and Joe hopefully will be joining me also on the board and helping me, is to create like consistent views of this project. And I want to take you step by step on how we would achieve that. There are a lot of different inputs that Gendo is able to like deal with. I will show you in a bit all of these different inputs. But for now, let's say we're going to start like this is the model, and we're going to start by capturing one of the views and start like what Ed was discussing also in his showcase. You should just like take an image and start and see where it goes from there. So I'm going to like it's as easy as grabbing a screenshot. So I mean, I can do it now live with you, or you can export an image. So Gendo deals with any sort of image input. So it needs to be a PNG, a JPEG, a WebP, any sort of image input that you can then just drag and drop inside the canvas. Maybe I could show you really quickly how this works. So I'm going to take another screenshot, sorry. And then I'm going to open Gendo, and you see here, this is my screenshot. You can just drag and drop it. You can copy and paste as well, and you can hit the upload image to add any image in. So this is the screenshot that I just took. And I mean, I'm just going to start. Yeah, I mean, I have this again quite detailed model, not all the way where it's like rendered into a realistic like image, sort of like an Enscape or a Lumion, but it's quite detailed. And I just want to start by rendering this into a realistic image, something super simple. So I'm going to select the image and hit the render design. Let me try to minimize this. Yep. And hit the render design, which is like the first feature that you would see related to the image. And I have prepared this reference image, which is an AI generated image. You can see here from the faces of the people, but I don't care about like the details of it. I just like the atmosphere of it. So I like the way the glass is represented in this, and I like the soft shadows that come with it, and I want to apply them basically to my design here. So what I'm going to do is I will simply select my image. Okay, sorry, because this is pre-done. I'm just gonna copy and paste this, and I'm selecting the image and I'm hitting the render design. And then here I'm like welcoming us is the new sort of sequential panels that George was just mentioning a minute ago, where you can collapse these inputs, and whenever you fill up one of them, you get this nice indication that it's done. And here in the description, basically, I will just describe what I want. Yeah, I want to, first of all, I want to render this design using the lighting, photographic style, and atmosphere of the reference image. And I will just add like the things that I just told you that I like, which is basically overcast sky with soft shadows. Yeah. I'm just going to hit generate. While it's generating, this is one of the inputs that you can have with Gendo. I've prepared here a board with all the different types of inputs. We have also other ones that I can walk you through, but we can go through them really quickly. So the render design, for example, or like any sort of like feature that we have can handle something from a very conceptual sketch like this one, where you're just like thinking about the ideas, to a more defined one where you are already setting the lines correctly. A massing model, so this could be something that you modeled in Revit, Rhino, it doesn't matter. It's software agnostic. You can model it anywhere, SketchUp, whatever. A more detailed but still white model. So here you can see we have a little bit more detail on the facade elements here, as well as a little bit more detail on the context around it. You can even have a layered model where each material, for example, is on a different layer that has just a color. And basically, you can use that to reference what each color means. So, here, for example, this is the prompt basically where cyan is the glass, beige is terracotta, brown is wood, and it maps it for you. Just need to communicate it quite well.
Yeah, maybe just on that one, Ismail, I think what's helpful to say is there's obviously you've used the sort of color ID effectively quite literally in the prompt. I think
Yeah,
I'd also add that you don't necessarily have to be so explicit in the prompt, depending on the kind of asset you've got. Because while it's not sort of explicit IDs in another way, it then sort of understands that those are the same object or might have the same finish. You know, the blue is glass. It sort of can
exactly.
then understand across different parts of the facade that it is, you know, the same sort of finish. It can be helpful just to do that, not full materialing, which I think Ed had done in a couple of his examples, which definitely helps with the specificity and control, more information to lean into. But doing these sort of block colors, even if arbitrary, can help distinguish between different sort of material finishes, which is, yeah, helpful.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And also, I mean, again, I would definitely use the Gendo assistant for that as well. Like you can just put this image and communicate to it what you want or what each layer is, and it would craft a prompt for you
Yeah.
correctly as well.
Yeah, and maybe throwing back to one of the questions about sort of consistency in some of the more creative things that happen. Chat can be one of the more creative features, and that's because there's sort of one more layer of AI between you and the sort of generation. Because while you're telling it things, it is sort of writing the prompt for you, which is then its interpretation of the instruction you've given it. Whereas when you use a feature directly, you write the prompt much more explicitly and can have more control, and therefore it can be more reliable. So as Ismail said, when you're in the earlier stages, chat's great because you can fly through it really quickly and do lots of iterations and variations. But when you start needing more specificity, more reliability, it can be helpful to jump to the tools directly yourself to keep that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I will show you an example also with our board that we are preparing now, just to walk through the other different inputs that you could use, and they all need just to be images. Yeah, I mean it's similar to what we just did with SketchUp. So this is similar to our SketchUp model where there are some sort of colors to the materials applied. The materials are not necessarily textured or realistic, but there is a little bit of a curation to the at least the colors of the materials, and this is like a little bit more detailed, let's say, to all the way to CGIs. Yeah, so you can have already a CGI like what also Ed showed with his endscapes, and it works really well also with that. And at this stage, the model follows much more your input because it understands that the designs have been made and a lot of decisions have been set, so it sticks to your like colors and inputs a little bit more, which is quite handy. Other types of inputs, yeah, you could have like a Google Earth with your design in it, collage, sort of collage, and you can start like rendering with that. Also, you could also sketch on. This is an example that we did earlier on. You can sketch on it. So it's sort of like a sketch where you can then apply like some sort of materials and then render it, yeah, in place. Let's see I always find this. Yeah, I need to move this. Yeah, okay. Let's see our generation, our first generation, how it went. So it did two options, and this is the new preview panel that George was just showing. So you're able to compare not on this is the actual asset, and you're comparing next to it. Yeah. So we have two outputs. Yeah. I think I prefer this one maybe. I will just place it on canvas, and you can see that I really like that it sort of captured the reflection of the glass that I liked about the reference image, as well as it captured really the colors of the reference image quite well. So this is a really good first step. And whenever I do this step from moving from, excuse me, something that is like a SketchUp model screenshot into a realistic image, it's sort of like you find right away what you don't like about the image. So, for example, what I can see here is that there's so much of the space down here that is occupied by like this road that does not make it quite friendly or pedestrian friendly, something that you see when the image becomes real. So this is why maybe starting uh, like doing this step of just realism makes you make better design decisions as well. So right now, I mean, I'm going to use, because it's still early and I still don't have no idea about like what sort of material I want to apply here other than like to replace the asphalt. It's a very good chance for me to use the Gendo assistant to like come up with some ideas. So I'm just gonna drag and drop this image here and tell it I want to replace the asphalt road material with something that is a bit more inviting and pedestrian friendly. I can see already, like down here below me, someone is already cracking on and creating other like images. I feel like I will be behind these guys. They design super quickly. I think it's Will or maybe George. But let's see what chat does. So basically, right now is going to look at the image. So it's inspecting it and trying to understand what I mean by what I'm saying. And then it will start like giving me some suggestions about what to do with this like asphalt road. So that's a great idea, replacing it. Okay, to get started, I need you to select the area. So it's asking me to select the area of the road, and it's giving me some options here. Right now, also this is like a good tip. I mean, I will cover the edit function where you can select areas. But because the asphalt is sort of occupying a big portion of the image. So it's not like a specific area inside the image. I will be touching it a bit more later on this. But because it's like occupying a big portion of the image from like side to side, so I'm going to use the entire image. And then it's asking me which material we should use. Yeah, I would maybe do that with earthy tones. Yeah, maybe it would give it like a better look, inviting look. And I'm going to use the entire image again because I'm not like manipulating a portion of the image. So this is a good example of just like editing everything. And it's just giving me here the confirmation of what it's going to do and if I'm happy with it to start rendering. Also because right now I'm like exploring ideas. I'm not really picky about like what it's doing, so I just want to see how it looks and how it feels with this design right now. While it's generating, maybe we can start taking a look at what the guys were doing right now. I was sure it was you, Will. You want to jump in, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, just to say that on the theme of consistency, obviously something that works quite well is Ismail had kind of established an initial render, obviously to be edited and changes to be made to his image, but that was already enough for me to take and use Ismail's output as one of my references. So you can see, yeah, what Ismail has on screen there is a slightly different view where I've taken one of Ismail's outputs, which has the right materiality, the right lighting that we're after, and then using that to apply it to a new, slightly different view of the same building, which works really nicely. and I'm just cooking a video in the background while we're doing the rest.
Amazing. I think the render is done now. I mean, it definitely looks better, I would say. What do you guys think? For the sake of time, also, I will not like be super picky about what it does, but it for sure makes it much more friendly, like pedestrian friendly and more inviting. So maybe we just need to add a little bit more life to this road, maybe by adding a couple of cars. So this is a very good occasion for us to use the edit tool. So I would use the edit tool if I want to edit a portion of the image, like I like what's going on, and I just want to maybe add something, remove something. I want to edit a portion of the image, and it works really well when we select an area. So let's say we want to add some cars maybe here in the driveway, maybe add a car here. So I'm going to, because right now I'm editing a portion of the image, I'm going to, it's asking me for an area. I'm not going to use the whole image. I'm going to select the area that I want to manipulate basically in the image. And really good advice. And this is something also related to how the models were trained and the types of images that they saw while they were being trained. Always try to, when you're selecting the area, first of all, this is not a precision selection, so I'm not going to like try to select like this is my car and I will try to, it's a bounding box of the car. No. What I would try to do is, first of all, give it like enough context. So I'm going to, for example, select a larger area where like I want to add the core. So I'm giving the model some context, and this does not need to be precise at all. It's not like the edges of this box need to fall exactly on my design. This is the first thing I would say. And then the second thing, I would always try to make it more towards a squarish selection rather than like being too wide or too tall. And this is because the probability of the model making something wrong when it's that like a tall selection is much higher than when it's a square selection. And this is basically because most of the images that it has seen, like while it's being trained, are more towards a square or maximum like this, a landscape sort of image. While like when it was being trained, it was never like fed with these sort of images, right? So, or it maybe was fed with these sort of images, but they were like proportionally much less than these sort of images. So always think about that while you're selecting. Try not to go extremely wide or extremely tall. So I'm going to like roughly make something like that. And then I'm going to save selection. And here we have an optional reference image that we can add. Maybe if I have like a specific car that I want to add. But here I would just go add a contemporary. I'm prompting like an architect now. Car to the driveway. Okay, and then I'm going to hit generate. So I'm hoping right now it will only edit the portion of the image that I have selected. So everything outside this box will not be edited, and it will hopefully add a car to the driveway here.
Maybe a couple of questions about masking have sort of come in specifically about the edit one, but I think as Ismail has said, it's more like a focus area rather than like an explicit thing. That being said, we are doing some work to allow for masking across tools more consistently.
Yeah.
But I think there's another question was sort of how do we decide when to be more creative or more controlled? I think this is one of those tricky areas where we sort of want to give the AI enough information and context around what you're doing, so that you might want shadows from this car, for example. So if you had tightly cropped a mask of a car, you might not then see the shadows, etc. So there's a fine balance, but we are making that hopefully a little more user friendly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a fine balance between, yeah, if you want like if your selection is exactly what you want the model to manipulate, even if it's that this case, it always relates to something outside the selection as well. So it's yeah, as you can see here, like if I selected exact area of a car and added it to this image, it wouldn't have blended that nicely into the image because then you lose all the shadows that it adds and everything that comes around it. Yeah, so this is why we made like the edit selection the way we did it right now. So we allow for these sort of edits to fall perfectly inside your image, if that makes sense. But that said, like what George is saying, we are working on improving the selection experience in a way that still allows you to do this kind of stuff. Yeah. So we've added our car to this image, and I think I'm pretty happy. Maybe we could like populate it with some people, but I've reached a point where I'm quite happy. Maybe we can also enhance it. Uh, let's go to the populate, and I'm here. You have some options about like what type of people you want to add to the image. I'm just going to make it the density to some, and in the description I will just because I like the look of it, I will add like motion blurred people or just motion blurred and see what happens. And yeah, I will leave like the mix open. And I'm adding some people, adding some life to it. And like probably maybe after that, I like the result. I really like the how it's captured the glass material here. I don't know. What do you think about this, George? I mean, you have an
Yeah,
eye for this stuff.
yeah, no, it's looking good. It's looking very convincing. Maybe to field another question that's come in the chat, which is when you choose to use an edit and the balance of those things. I mean, maybe I can give my answer first, Ismail, and you see what you think. But I think some of our assumption around those features is that with render, that all that's really true in that image is the geometry, is your design, and that we will then sort of infer from that and add materiality, lighting, context, etc. So render in the traditional sense. Whereas other tools like edit and swap material will assume to varying degrees that everything else is also true, that the lighting and the material is true and therefore to be respected and consistent across iteration. So our assumption is that if you're coming in with a fresh sketch, a fresh screenshot, whatever it is, that the first tool you might use is render, because you can get 80% of it done. The architecture geometry stays the same, the composition should stay the same, etc. And then you go into iterating details with edit, with swap material to make those small controlled changes, where swap material will keep geometry consistent as well, but change the materiality, like swapping a material in SketchUp or 3ds Max or whatever. Whereas edit will allow bigger geometry changes. So we've seen Ismail added a car with edit. Swap material and render wouldn't have done that because they would have wanted to keep the driveway and the garage and that sort of geometry clean and consistent across iterations, whereas render will do the sort of edit will deviate from that, so more flexible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can do it like a swap material over here, an iteration of it. So, like as George just mentioned, swap material is very specific to like changing materials, right? So maybe let's change the material of the garage door here. So it allows you to select uh, perfectly, let's say, because you're sort of changing a surface, right? So this gives you like the lasso tool. Again, we are working on unifying the sort of selection experience and like the way you communicate with the models is a little bit of a complex problem that we are actively solving right now. So that you as users, you will be able to like choose whichever way you want to select with. And let's, yeah, replace the, the material, the garage door with dark, like material. Just gonna hit generate. While it's doing that, I don't know if Georgian really want to mention something, or I can jump into another image. I can see
Yeah,
Will
I've got a
absolutely
couple.
smashing it. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple beneath here. I mean, I was just going to drag mine up next to Will so that we can sort of compare our
Ah,
consistency, and
yeah.
maybe copy one of yours as well, because I think it looks like we've sort of done a similar thing, right? With using prompts that sort of align with the material palette, but using the same sort of references across those things. So the first key reference, the first image that Ismail has made, and I mean, again, we're being quite quick here, but I would say that those are pretty clear and pretty consistent. Like the architecture is consistent, as is the material palette. Obviously, Ismail has added different road texture to his, but we could repeat the same process too. But hopefully it's consistent enough, across this sort of set. I feel like I'd be happy to put those ones out in front of people and say that it is, the same project at least.
I just wanted to call out as well the a really nice feature from videos. If people haven't already seen, videos are great, and I've got an example there that was generating the background. But also, there's a really nice feature which allows you to save a frame from a video out into the canvas, which is what I've done on mine as well, just to kind of present an array of different views. It's a very, if you've done something like, in my case, I did a cinematic edit, which part of that preset is to create different views and different slight movements around the building. And what I've done in the board is then extract some of those views and use them as references to other things, or just to have them as a slightly different option, different materiality, etc. So yeah, really nice little feature that's maybe hidden away is using videos and extracting frames just
Nice.
to add to your board.
Yeah, this shot, I like, really like this shot.
Yeah. I also did something with again, just for consistency's sake, took Ismail, one of your generations where you've added a car. I've taken that image and used that again as a reference in an edit to have some consistency. So if you did want, obviously mine's a slightly different view, but if you did want to have
Ah, yeah.
similar cars or similar things, you can obviously cut those out and use those as references in edits as well. It doesn't have to just be a reference for a render. It can be something that applies when you're just doing an edit. So you can see there, I've got the same car parked on a slightly different spot.
Yeah, nice.
Super.
There was a question about scale, which maybe also relates to that image too, and about getting things the right sort of size. What typically helps is that there is context in there where you might have like a low poly image or not loads of detail. It then leaves it open to interpretation, like how big things are. Whereas I think in Will's picture, the scale looks pretty decent because the garage door is there, so it can sort of scale against that relatively. So I think with Populate, sometimes people can be a bit of a funny height to
Yeah.
where you have like door frames or furniture or something that is, human scale, then it does a better job of placing those people because it can sort of relate that to the rest of the scene.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, one of my generations, the scale was off. And definitely I would something that about like how you prepare your models. So I would definitely here in this model that I have, what was missing is a reference to scale, and just one person here would make my shots. Just placing a person here, even if it's like a low poly, just an indication of a person height would make this shot much, much better, and would make the model understand the scale much, much better, and not
Yeah,
do these
maybe.
type of mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe another point to make quickly is that, we've touched upon the inherent randomness of AI. Gendo is a creditless platform, so there's nothing stopping you from rolling the dice again and seeing if there's a better outcome. Of course, we'd want to get it right first time and work towards that. But not having credits means that you can iterate as many times as you like to get an image that you're happy with. I think that's an important detail to highlight.
Yeah, and reflecting back to what Ed was saying, which I completely agree with, like about like when he was describing the process of being model design, image, design, image. This, like what we're doing now is part of the design process, yeah. And you shouldn't be, while you're designing, you shouldn't be thinking about, should I make this decision or it's too expensive? It's a bit strange. Like it makes you stop your design process. So I think it's fundamental that the image bit because images are so essential in the design process that there's no blocker there. You're just like trying things. When you have an idea, you try it, and even if it doesn't work, you have to try it and know that it doesn't work. And since we were talking about like how you prepare your models before you take them into Gendo, this is a very interesting example that something that happened to George while he was working on an ArchiCAD model. As you can see here, this is the input image, yeah, and there's a very tiny little detail of the like the crosshair of the camera when he was taking the screenshot that got implemented into the design somehow. Like Gendo's like our models were able to capture it. So yeah, I mean, you need to prepare your screenshots the way you want to communicate things to the model, more or less. Yeah. This was a funny one, Georgia.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's also things like ISO curves in Rhino, if that's what you're working with, or edges in SketchUp, like you can adjust the viewport sort of settings and styles. Because going back to some previous points and questions, like we assume the design is intentional and that everything about that is intentional. So hence sort of seeing the crosshair and thinking, okay, well, that's part of the design, therefore it has been reflected in the render. Please make sure that when you have those extra lines that it is what you want to see, because we'll assume so and run with it to some funny outcomes.
I want to touch maybe just because as of right now we were using render design all the time, but I mean this is a little bit of a tricky sort of view where you have like a lot of detail that is so far away from the camera, let's say. So in that case, I mean, I'm just going to try it. In that case, I would add an extra step. Again, I'm trying things, so it could work and it could not work. I don't know, we would see, but I want to take the leap from like it being a screenshot to realism using the enhance tool, which basically this is what it does. The enhance, it takes your image exactly as it is and it just tries to make it photorealistic. So it's much more precise than the render design, which has a lot of different inputs where you can like add a reference, add a prompt, say stuff. So there's a lot to handle there. The enhanced image is much more simpler in the way it's just focused on enhancing photorealism, which I think would be the right start for this image. Even if we don't get like the color consistency of the rest of the project, maybe we could then
Yeah.
reference it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe to contrast this against what we were saying about render, where we assume it is only the geometry, which is the bit that matters, and maybe like the blocking of colors for segmentation. Enhance will assume that the textures are also true. So we should hope
Yeah.
to see that grass is in the right place, the wood is in the right place, that that material palette sort of comes through, but in a photoreal way. There was a question in the chat about enhance, maybe changing the lighting and some of the details. We're introducing a slider so that you
Yeah.
can say more or less creative, because sometimes you want it to stick really critically closely to what you've got, and sometimes you want it to fill in the details a bit more where you've maybe not specified everything. So that's something that will be out shortly against that feature. And no reference image for the enhance, because we assume that that is photorealism, the last sort of 5–10%, just to elevate everything that's already within the image.
Yeah, just to add on to that as well, I mentioned in the chat earlier on that that can be quite a good way as well, just to harmonize things in the image a little bit. If you've done tons and tons of changes and maybe things are slightly, a few seams or a few lighting things that are a little bit inconsistent, sometimes enhance is a nice way of making everything sort of reharmonized in the same image again. And actually, we're going to be releasing something soon that allows you to decide how strongly you want that enhancement to be, because that will help in that situation where you can just do a tiny bit of enhancing and that will just knit everything together nicely, if you do have slight differences in parts of the image.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you definitely have these situations where your image is almost finished, like it's almost done, and you just want to take it like a step further into realism. So you would have like the control for that. And other situations where, like the one that I was doing right now, where you want actually the model to do the leap from realism without losing any detail. So yeah, we will give this slider that makes you do these different modes, let's say. So yeah, I mean, I think this is good. I mean, I will try to use now render design to apply the lighting and see how it does. I will use actually my OG reference image for that, and I would say only apply the lighting and photographic style of the reference image. Let's see what it does. It's a
Cool.
tricky shot, this one, to be honest. I mean, we are also working on capturing these tricky shots automatically and being able to deal with them a little bit
Yeah.
better.
I was maybe going to highlight something that Ed referenced to, which is that in his prompt, he sort of says where in the world this is, like
Yeah.
whether that's literally like in the shadow of Mount Etna or in Sicily or in London, whatever it is. This sort of goes back to what we were saying about the words you use, because when we say that we're in London, it will know what London is, and it will know sort of brick houses, grey skies, all of those
Yes.
things that people associate. Whereas with Sicily, it knew the right kind of vegetation and landscaping and context and vista to maybe sort of show. So I like to include like where I am in the world in a prompt, because it will then, fill in those gaps nicely, put the right kind of vegetation is in. Whereas when that is a bit absent, it then just sort of, put something in, but it's a little less specific.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, this is the first example that came to mind when we were rendering this image. Just by saying it's London, you can feel like something in the lighting and like the houses here that just feels London, right?
Yeah, a bit grey and flat.
I was
Yeah,
about to say
Yeah.
that's the grey sky.
I was trying to be politically correct. Uh,
yeah,
I
nice. That's
mean,
like a bit warmer.
yeah, exactly. It applied a little bit without changing anything about the design. I don't know. It feels like the same project. I mean, of course, also when you're presenting a project, you don't want like we saw it with Ed's images. You don't want all the images to be exactly the same lighting, right? Like you can definitely start playing a bit maybe with this image to make it a little bit more towards the evening. Again, adding the context of the location would make an evening look correct to where these buildings are placed, but at the same time still keep it within the same like design language. So yeah, I mean, I think I've covered everything. Other, if you want me to cover something else, or if there are some specific questions about things we.
Yeah, maybe there's one question. This has come up in a couple of different ways, but about aspect ratio and image resolution. So we work hard to keep the aspect ratio the same, whatever's sort of happening. But what happens with the image resolution is, as I said, we use lots of different models behind the scenes, and depending on which model we're using, who you're using and how you're using it, the resolution may change. So when you click on an image and zoom in on the bottom left corner, you should see what the resolution of that currently selected image is. So you should be able to track this as you're going. But the change is basically due to the models. Like generating things at a higher resolution takes exponentially longer. And again, we assume an iterative workflow so that you sort of work through sort of between 1 and 2K images. And then when you've got something you're happy with, then we sort of upscale to higher resolution things. But in that sort of swapping between models and processes, we do upscale and downscale a bit, which then introduces rounding errors with the aspect ratio. So what you may see over a course of lots of different features is that 1 or 2 pixels out at most on the aspect ratio, but the resolution may deviate a little depending on which step you're using. So we try to keep it high where we can. We try to composite where we can, but there is a sort of natural limit to that.
Yeah, I have a couple of things also to add to that. So, first of all, about our choice of iterating around between 1 and 2K. The first choice is, of course, it's an iterative process, and we want like to serve you the images much faster than having like a full resolution 4K image, but also because models tend to be much better around this resolution, and I'm guessing it's also because of the way they were trained. This is the vast majority of the images. They stand between 1K and 2K, and the model seems to perform much better when it's working with these sort of resolutions. So it's also a model choice, not just like speed choice. But thing to add also is when you're using the edit. So for example, here I use the edit to add the core. This will keep the resolution exactly the same. So because it doesn't touch anything outside of that. So if you have an image where you want to edit a portion of that, you have a very fixed resolution aspect ratio, using the edit function would mean that this is fixed. Yeah. Even if this was like a 4K image, a much higher resolution image, it will not be downscaled. It will only add or edit the portion of the image that you have selected there.
Yeah, I mean, this maybe was also an answer to another question someone asked about sort of AI faces of people, and depending on how big they are in the image, they can be a bit squished. What
Yeah.
edit is good for as well is that we sort of zoom in on a detail, so you can make
Yeah.
faces look better if they're, front and center to improve the quality and have them sort of stitched back in. And there was another question about sort of density of populate. Um,
Ah,
the tool has a sort of population slider, which is relative to the image. So you can see it goes from low to packed. A packed living room would be 10 people, but a packed football stadium would be 10,000. So it sort of understands contextually within the image what packed means. So this again is sort of relative. So someone asking about football events, you should be able to get busy scenes, and you should be able to describe in the additional keywords like that they might be doing football or whatever, or watching sport or cheering, and get some very specific activation in depending on what your project actually is.
Yeah. Also, just to jump in as well, we had a question about being restricted to photorealistic images. Obviously, the focus on today has been consistency, and that tends to be photorealistic consistency because you're trying to represent the same project. But I just did a generation while we were chatting there just to show off the style features. Um, so yeah, you can of course you can put any of the images you've got into, as Ismail showing there, a number of styles that we've added to the platform, which are very consistent themselves. If you use the same preset across multiple images, you'll get a lot of the same. They'll look like the same style effectively, which is really nice. And that's one of the ways to take it out of the photorealistic realm and into something that's more stylized. We will be adding very, very soon the opportunity to add your own custom style. So if you do have your own in-house graphic style, or maybe it's just an aesthetic style or something that is something that you always tend to produce images using, you can upload a reference image and make it a custom style for this feature. So it doesn't have to be one of those presets. But biased, I do think those are some great presets to get you going and cover a few different types of aesthetic, which is nice. And they are consistent. So we could put
yeah.
another one of those photo realistic images in, and we could get a very, very consistent art style out to match the one that I've already done.
Yeah, maybe to add to that a little, the style tool, like Enhance, assumes that the materiality, lighting, architecture is consistent and is only working to change the aesthetic without changing the content, the information in there. So you can do this sort of style transfer right at the end, but it is also true that you can just prompt from the beginning
Yeah.
a hand sketch, a watercolor, whatever it is you're after. You don't have to do photographic all the way through and then stylize. You can just work within your style. But as Will says, we've done photorealism for the consistency benchmarking, but you can, of course, just do that the whole time. That's up to you.
Yeah, maybe just because I can see a question from Sophie there that's just come in asking about using a reference image from previous work. So yeah, it depends on the image. If you're doing a render, as Ismail showed, you can upload one of those images from previous work as a reference image if that's what you want. Like I said, we'll be adding the style, custom style soon, but you can still kind of do that as George is alluding to as well. If you do a full image, maybe as well, you can show the edit panel. There's the option to just do a full image edit, and this is quite a nice way of doing that. So if you do have a style you've done previously, you could do edit tool up and then add. I mean, in this case, maybe we can add the one I've already done, but you can add an image reference and edit the whole image, and that's a nice way to get the style to change to something that you've done before. Maybe your own practice has its own style. Yeah, exactly that.
And also Gendo Assistant helps with that, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm very excited, super excited about like the custom style because it's another level of like custom styling where it actually the model tries to actually extract the style of the image, which is like not as simple as it sounds. So styles are very specific and like you need to understand like the way for example, here the pen is like leaving the ink. They are very specific, and you can see how well it transforms sorry, I'm getting used to the new preview. How well it transforms the blurry even vegetation here into a style. So yeah, I'm quite excited for the custom one where you can literally just like give it an image of the style that you want to replicate, and it studies the image and it tries to understand the style and then applies it to the your input image.
Cool. Okay, well, conscious of time, so maybe we can show you some of what we're working on next. So Ismail, maybe I can take the screen back and Will can talk us through.
Yeah, maybe just say before I do that I think Joe will email a link to
Yeah.
the board, the public board at the end of the session as well, so that you guys can actually explore the canvas, zoom in, see the details, because obviously it doesn't always track over Zoom in the same way, so you can actually go and explore the board. So I think we'll follow up with a link to that
And watch
after
the
the
video
session
also. It
and
looks
watch the video. Yeah.
so cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
Cool.
amazing. Yeah, great. Well, yeah, to talk through some upcoming features then. I've alluded to some in the chat if you've been reading the chat, but yeah. So we had a question about annotation in the chat about, is it just for annotating for your own benefit, or is it actually something that can change generations? Currently, today, it's purely for markup, but very, very, very shortly, we're going to be releasing a change that allows you to use annotations as part of the input itself. So George is flicking through a few examples. You can see in this one here, we've drawn, I don't know who's drawn that, a rough stool outline, looking good, George, of where you want this change to be, and a reference image in the top corner. And then in the panel, I don't know if we've got an image of that, but in the panel, there's an option to select, yes, I want the annotations that I've drawn to be part of the generation, but you don't have to choose that. So even if you have annotated it, you can disable it so that they're not part of the generation. But it's a nice way and here's another example. And actually, this maybe came up earlier as well, just in relation to scale and scale of people. This is a nice way of doing that as well. So here's an example George has done with annotating where he wants a person to be generated. And due to the size of the annotation, it also gives the model an idea of how big that person should be. So it's not just positional in terms of where they get generated into the image, it's also a good indicator of scale, which is super useful.
And
Um,
consistent with style as well, so
and
not a
consistent, yeah,
photographic. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, consistent with style too. So the nice thing is the annotation it can be interpreted in a realistic way if your image is realistic, or stylized, as George has just shown there. So really powerful. This is a nice one. Maybe hard to spot initially, but George has added in some interesting lighting. I would say it's to my taste, but I'm not sure it is. Some hanging lighting drawn with different colors as well, which is super nice. So that's a didn't mention that, but there's different pen colors too for the annotation tool, for that pencil tool. And so this is a really nice way of designing in Canvas. If you do want a quick test of a variation, or you want to try something out and you don't want to go and model it, I mean, you can get a super nice indication of how that's going to look by annotating, choosing that annotation when you generate, and then using that in the output, which is really nice. So that's going to be very soon. Can see some messages in the channel saying they're already excited for that, which is awesome.
Nice.
So
And
that's
just
the new annotation. Yeah, go on,
yeah,
Josh.
and this would just be part of edit, right? Because as we sort of said, edit does the bigger changes, deviates from the architecture. Like here, where I've added new things in new geometry, it will then sort of live as part of the edit feature and not the others. Cool.
Amazing. And then yes, on the topic of, we did a swap material example earlier, but this is, we've added a feature now to allow for even more control of how materials are generated. There's obviously scale is one aspect. So sometimes you'll have a material sample, and that could be a very small sample that doesn't maybe reflect the scale of how a material would look in situ. So we've added some additional controls, which are optional. You don't need to do this, but you can get even better results by actually changing the scale of your material sample. So in this case here, we've got tiles. Obviously, there's different tiles of different sizes. This gives you a rough indicator of, okay, this is roughly how big my tile should appear in the image, and you have that slider there to control that. And you have the same for scale. So if there's a certain orientation of material, obviously, rather than generating multiple times until it happens to be the right orientation, you can actually just set that rotation as part of the controls. So these are two new fields that basically give you more control over that generation. I can see someone's asked for timeline. This is very soon, so in the next few weeks for sure.
Yeah, and works nicely with our material bank catalog on the
Yes.
platform too, where we have a huge, 16,000 different material assets of real world products that you can specify on your projects. And you can click through to material bank to order those samples for free. But for our purposes, it's super helpful just to quickly grab the right reference image and then take it into the swap material tool.
Yeah, great. And maybe I'll maybe let Ismail talk about this one a little bit because this is something that he's been cooking up in the background. But we've been working on some improvements to chat, full stop. So the Gendo assistant that many of you will have used before, we're trying to improve, make smarter, make more dynamic in the things that it can do. Maybe I'll hand over to Ismail to talk about someone I think actually asked in the chat about is there a way to have project memory and project references that kind of persist. So maybe I'll pass you to you, Ismail, to talk about the upcoming changes in the next couple of months towards this point.
Yeah, so it's because basically I'm a huge fan of the Gendo assistant. I think it's the way we should be designing it. As you saw, like with the demo that we were doing, it's so nice when you're just trying ideas and it just like bounces these ideas with you and gives you some really nice suggestions. So I've been working a lot on improving it, and one of the biggest, it's a tiny thing, but it does a huge improvement is basically giving it some project context. So basically a memory of what's going on with the project. So like what Ed was describing when he was going through his project, they were saving these prompt templates and reusing them. You wouldn't need that because chat basically, if it has this context, it will be able to already automatically do it for you. So one of the things that we are working on is that it remembers things and you have the sort of control on when to add this memory in and when you wouldn't want to use it. But other really important things that it can do also is the way it references images and it references styles. So as you saw in the little snippet video here, where inside the prompt you could, okay, so this is, maybe you can go through them one by one, like these little ones, where there is a light version of it inside the canvas that is able to execute things for you on the fly. This is a very simple example of it, reordering things, but also inside the chat itself, you're able to reference memories and reference styles as well that you have saved as an organization. So this is another example where you're doing this on the fly sort of rendering thing, and because it has all the information it needs, it's able to do it on the fly for you. And this is another example of it because it understands how Gendo works. It understands how each image was produced, and you're able to replicate the steps that were made to do this image, to be able to remember stuff on the fly or like create different views for you on the fly. So there are these two versions of it where you have this assistant that you're able to call in and do quick tasks for you, but you have this very information rich, I would say, agent that is able to that understands the project context and understands all the nuances that come with it, so it's able to assist you in a better way, let's say. So yeah, I'm really excited for this one. It's going to take a little bit more time, I would say, but it's looking to be quite useful.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, we said right at the top about the ambition of Gendo and wanting for it to be like accessible, easy to use, architecturally relevant. I think the material bank integration, those sort of things, I think are great indicators of the direction of travel, where it is operating within an architectural context with real world references, all grounded in professional context, not sort of AI gimmicks, which is maybe sort of an answer to one of the other questions in chat, which about like what differentiates Gendo specifically against other platforms. And I think it is that point really that there are lots of places you can go if you want to try 50 different AI models and you want to play with all the knobs and whistles and depth that comes with that. And that's great if you want to do that. But if you want to worry about delivering your architecture project, making use of the best tech, but not having to worry about all of the sort of AI nonsense, that's what Gendo is for. it should be the case that you can come in, only think about design, but get what you need quickly, and then move on and carry on with the other important bits of your work, not to be connecting nodes and workflows and worrying about data pipelines and which of these models is good for what step, blah, 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 blah. That's what Ismail's for. So you can leverage all of our collective knowledge that's wrapped up inside the product, so that you just don't have to stress about all that detail. So I think hopefully an answer in that there. Cool. Yes. Just flashing this up quickly, I mean, one of our more recent webinars was to launch the video tool, which Will briefly demoed. You can find that recording on YouTube if you'd like to go back and watch it in more detail. But one of the immediate bits of feedback we got during that webinar and the sort of following weeks was having unlimited video generations in the same way that we have unlimited images on the platform now, which is something we believe in, that you should just be able to iterate and edit. Generating videos, however, is quite a different ball game from generating images, so we are sort of forced to move that into a different kind of subscription. But I think what it also opens an opportunity for is to service more of the mid-large size studios, to have more organizational control, standardization, repeatability across design teams and projects. So a lot of what Studio Scale is about is that sort of larger organizational thing, but part of it is also the unlimited video generation. People who are on a paid plan can use the video tool, but it currently just requires you buy seconds as separate one-off packs to add to your account and use at your leisure. So you can get to the video tool. It is just priced slightly differently outside of the typical subscription. So if you're interested in this, please do get in touch. We're talking to some early access studios at the moment to run some of these new features and things against. So please do make yourselves known if you would like to be among them. But just to flash that is also sort of upcoming in the next few weeks and months. Nice. Maybe Joe for one more poll.
Yeah, a very short one, just to launch. Let me just pop this one up now. So hopefully all on your screen. So yeah, maybe just to cover a couple of bits as George was talking, thanks so much obviously for going through and hopefully giving kind of a variety of different bits of advice and follow through. So it'd be great to understand how much more confident you may feel now using Gendo than you did at the start. We appreciate all feedback around this as well. So please do. And then of course, George has just touched on something which is the studio scale which we're looking in. So it'd be great as well just to, if you know which one you're most interested in, I suppose, to help gauge some of those delivery timelines as well. And then of course, if you're interested to hear a bit more about that and what that entails, just simply hit yes and we'll be in touch in the next few days. There's also a free form box as well if you've got the chance. Maybe just as that's happening, as we'll go through, we've had a lot of questions. We're going to get back to everyone. Don't worry if your questions hasn't been answered. We've had a lot directly and we've had a lot in the chat as well. But George, maybe while this is up, I don't know if there's any other ones you want to tackle.
Yes, there was maybe one, I think Omid has asked a couple of times, apologies for missing that in the flow, a question about generating drawings. An important question, I think. There are, again, lots of platforms you can go to help with sort of that side of things. We operate under the assumption that you, the user, are the architect, are the designer, are in control of those things, and that AI is supporting you in that, which maybe also goes back to what Ed was doing at the start. Like he was putting in detail into his model, specifying lots of nice little things that was architectural design, and then Gendo was adhering to that. So we try hard to stick to your design as you've specified it, rather than do the design for you. So we don't really do technical drawings. You can bring in technical drawings to turn them into a watercolor, for example, or maybe to texture them, but we again will stick to the drawing as it is in the image. So we don't sort of generate those for you. And about changing camera views, you can ask chat to do it, and it does an okay job sometimes. But again, this is something that I'm always a bit hesitant about, because the AI only sees what is inside of your image. So if you ask the camera to do a 180, it will make up what it is seeing the other way entirely, which is not what us as designers should be expecting. But when you might want to make a small camera adjustment or turn it into an AXO diagram, as long as all the information is within that image to begin with, it could do an okay job at making those changes. But again, we assume that the composition and consistency is is intentional. So some of that stuff is not super reliable, and if done, is maybe not more out of luck than it is out of intention.
Awesome. If you want to hit the next slide, George.
Oh, yes.
Perfect. And then, yeah, we've covered that in one. Next slide. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, massive thank you to everyone. I mean, the chat's been incredible. Thank you so much for everyone kind of asking questions. And as I say, we'll get back to those. I know Ed had to jump at the start, but like, or in the middle, but just, massive thanks to him as well. And of course, massive thanks to Will, Ismail, and George for going through everything in a lot of detail. As George mentioned at the start of the call, we always do offer onboarding calls as well. So if you're interested as well, just get in touch. Feel free to contact any of us or just email support@gendo.ai, and we'll always happily go through things in more detail. Thanks for dropping in all the questions and feedback as well. There's just one thing to mention, of course, if you are looking at the annual plan, we are happy to offer a 15% off plus the 2 months free with Control 15 as the code as well. So I'll be in touch on email on that as well, but maybe just pass back to George, Will, and Ismail to say thanks.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank you to Ed in his absence again for running us through the project. Thank you to you all for taking the time this afternoon to listen to us and for all of your amazing questions. Hopefully, we covered most of them. Where we haven't, we'll try and get back to you otherwise. But otherwise, yeah, thanks to Will, Ismail, and to Joe for making sure this all plays out nice and smoothly. So, yeah, appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, guys.
Thanks. We'll be in touch with the next one, which will be in the next couple of weeks as well. So keep an eye on your emails. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.